Aloha. Welcome to the Mr.G podcast. This is episode 27. Today is Sunday, June 11th, 2023. It's a sizzling 78 degrees here at about 7:30 in the morning on the outskirts of Chinatown in Honolulu, Hawaii, the largest city in the Pacific, the oldest city in the Pacific. On yesterday's podcast, we had a great episode. It was one for the record books. We did the top 5 best UFO evidence of the 21st century, as well as my favorite UFO stories as well. Today, it's a lighthearted Sunday. We're just going to talk about concerts. When I was growing up, I used to go to music concerts, and I remember the very first concert and the second concert and the third concerts. I wouldn't go to concerts now, or at least I wouldn't enjoy them like I did when I was in my teens and in my 20s. And somehow I managed to get tickets, and somehow we made it happen. What is the first concert you guys ever went to? Put it in the comments. The very first music concert I ever went to was a band that none of you listening have ever probably heard of, a band called Humble Pie. I have barely even heard of them. You can barely even find anything on the internet about them. But when I was a door-to-door newspaper salesperson in a crew with a bunch of other kids my age, 14, 15, 16, and we worked at this job with our boss was this guy, John Ornelas. He was like in his 40s and an alcoholic. He drove a beat up Bolt van. He'd pick us up and drop us off at all of our houses, take us to different neighborhoods around South Texas, and we would sell newspaper subscriptions. So on this particular weekend, he said if we sold a certain amount of subscriptions, he'd take us to this concert. And I was like 15 years old, had never been to a concert. I remember on the way there, I had a pair of handcuffs that I had bought from like a spy store, and they were real handcuffs. And I handcuffed my twin brother Michael and this other guy Jason Lafferty together on our way to the concert, and they were just like, and I wouldn't give them the key. I told them I didn't have the key, and they were just fighting with each other, just like each of them were cuffed, and they were almost in a fist fight. And then finally, they made me unlock them. But the concert itself, Humble Pie, their most famous song was 40 Days in the Hole. So if you want to look up Humble Pie on the internet, their single that they had came out in the 1970s. This was in the 90s when we saw the concert. But their one song that got any traction was called 40 Days in the Hole. And John Ornelas was like an old hippie type. And so he knew he knew a lot about music. John Ornelas taught me more than any other adult in my whole life. And I really appreciate that for him. He wasn't the greatest guy, but he did teach me more than anybody else, any other adult when I was growing up. Part of the reason was because I was the number one salesperson in this newspaper job, and it was a commission-based job. So I made him more money than any other young person as well. But John Ornelas knew Humble Pie, and he knew all the words, and I really enjoyed the concert a lot. Even though I wasn't familiar with the band, I got up really close and I could feel the music and the bass, and it was a really interesting experience. There were attractive women there, and I remember meeting some of them and talking to some of them, and even getting a little play and stuff. But it was just a really great social experience, and I enjoyed it more than anybody else. But when I was growing up, I was embarrassed to admit that. What was the first, when somebody asked you the question, what's the first concert you ever went to? Oh, Humble Pie. Humble what? Like it's a band nobody ever heard of. Because the second concert I went to was just blow the tops on that. The second concert I ever went to was White Zombie and Pantera. And this was in for the Great Southern Trendkill tour. It must have been 96 or 97. So I was about 16 or 17. No, I was about 16. I wasn't 17 yet. And I had the time, me and my friends, Jonathan, Benny, and even my brother a little bit, we would listen to Pantera and White Zombie in particular, because White Zombie was a little bit more mainstream. And they had a few songs that they played on the radio and stuff, like Astro Creep 2000 and More Human Than Human. Pantera was just like hardcore, and and we were familiar with them somewhat. But on my way to the concert, I was supposed to like meet up with Nathan Guidoni actually too, and uh, we go to the concert. We go to the concert. I'm on my way to the concert, like to the bus stop, and it's in the early afternoon. And I'm walking to the bus stop, and a car drives by me as I'm walking down Henderson Pass towards Thousand Oaks. And the car like flicks me off. A couple of young guys in there in the car flick me off or yell some stuff. And I'm on my way to the Pantera concert. I'm feeling all tough. And I flick them off back. Hey, they flicked me off. I flicked them off, right? And then a guy gets out of the car, and I remember him having like a some sort of object or something, but he gets out of the car, then he goes directly at me, and I don't throw any punches or anything. Next thing I know, he just like fucking hits me in the head with something, and I'm on the ground, and they get in the car and drive off, and my head is busted open and pouring out blood. So I walk to the Stop and Go, later Diamond Shamrock at Thousand Oaks in Henderson Pass, and I go in there and I sit on the little chairs they have in there, and they call the police, and the police come, and I tell them what happened. The cop doesn't believe me. He's like, "Oh, this doesn't sound right. Why would a car just come out and do that to you?" I was like, "That's what happened." And he didn't even believe me and was like giving me shit like cops used to always do in South Texas and San Antonio in the 90s. And then he tells me that I need to go to the hospital, and I'm either going to go in an ambulance or have somebody come and take me there. And my mom actually lives across town, and she didn't have custody of us growing up. And so I hadn't seen her maybe in a week or two. And I couldn't call my father because he didn't give a shit about us. But I called my mom and I asked if she could take me to the hospital, because apparently I needed stitches and my head was pouring blood. So my mom comes, I'm covered in blood, and she takes me to the hospital. They give me like 12 stitches above my left eyebrow, one of the eyebrow, both of my head. There's stitches all on my forehead from here to here from different altercations. But this was the first time I had my face stitched up. And we go to the hospital, they stitch me up. They give me a couple pain pills, and then my mom takes me to Target or Walmart or somewhere and buys me like all new clothes. And then she takes me to the Freeman Coliseum where the concert was at. If you want to know what day this happened, it was the day that White Zombie and Pantera played at the Freeman Coliseum. And so she takes me to the concert, and I have all these bandages on my head and stuff. And I end up running into my friends there, Nathan Guidoni and everybody, and they're like, "Oh, what happened? Did that happen in the mosh pit?" Everybody asked me that all night. "Whoa, did that happen in the mosh pit?" Because I had like bandages on one side of my face. But I still was like, looked cool, I guess. The best thing about that concert was the amount of young women. For the first time, everybody was like, I was up close to the stage, but like a lot of women were like, they wanted, I was near like half a dozen, at least half a dozen women. Like I don't go into detail. All right. Hey man, I was 17-year-old Mr. G. What do you expect? Okay. Women were ripping my fucking clothes off at that time. And at a concert when a lot of young people are all together, I had a lot of like, action, a lot of women rubbing on me and vice versa. And it was a very pleasant experience, and I left with a few phone numbers that I never called. But it was a great concert, and I really loved it. White Zombie opened for Pantera. It was crazy the amount of energy and moshing, and like I said, there was so many attractive women and everything like that. And it was a really great experience, and I ended up getting home safely. And it was an awesome, I pretend that's the very first concert I went to. But obviously Humble Pie came before that. I got to take some Humble Pie here and mention Humble Pie was the first concert. The third concert was probably the last one I mentioned here, was an awesome one as well. That was Rage Against the Machine and Sunken Gardens, I think in 1996. And I went to that concert by myself, I think, but I was friends with the radio station 99.5 Kiss. I had a friend there, a DJ, and I would call up the radio station a lot. So they managed to give me tickets, free tickets to a number of concerts, maybe a dozen concerts. And they would also play my voice on the air in different conversations and stories and jokes I would do. which is funny because I'm later on doing this podcasting, and I also, did some work for National Public Radio, NPR, as well. But it goes all the way back to when I was a teenager, calling up the radio station and talking to the DJ Josh. And Josh would put me on the air. He'd let me request whatever song I want, and he'd hook me up with concert tickets a lot of times too. Tickets to the Sunken Gardens concerts they had there, tickets to concerts they had at White Rabbit. But on this particular, I think I paid for the Rage Against the Machine tickets. I was, making good money as a door-to-door newspaper salesman, $400 to $500 a week. I was the top salesman. So I bought these tickets to Rage Against the Machine, and it was right when Evil Empire first came out, the album that they're most known for, that has the songs Bulls on Parade and People of the Sun. Those are the two biggest singles off of Evil Empire. And it has the, image of the guy with just like a superhero with a haircut or whatever. But that song, I don't remember who the opening band was, but they played and nobody really cared or anything. But then the band Rage Against the Machine, they came out and they didn't even do a sound check. They just came out, and then they opened with one of those two songs, either People of the Sun or Bulls on Parade, I think, when it's like dun, 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 and everybody, Sunken Gardens is an outside area, and the front of the stage is like sunken down, and then there's like an outside area where everybody's spread out. But they came out and they opened with that song and that riff, and everybody came running like bulls on parade. And they were just like running to the stage, and I was already up at the stage, and it was the craziest concert because they were just playing those awesome songs. And at one point it was just like a riot, so much moshing, so much craziness. Like at one point somebody climbed up the light pole and like started like beating up the light. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. People were climbing to the top of the stage, and like because at Sunken Gardens there's like an area at the top where there's like rocks and woods and stuff. And I've been up there before. I took a female up there once during a concert. I forget which one. Oh, I'll tell you that story some other time. But on this concert, I was in front of the stage, Rage Against the Machine, and I left and I bought 2 shirts before I left, and I wore those shirts forever. One of those shirts had like a black rim around the collar, like the baseball style, and it actually fit me. It wasn't like baggy, because people in the 90s sometimes would, maybe even me, would wear like baggy clothes for some reason. But this was a tight fitting shirt. And that's what back then I was like, oh, it's too tight, but really like looked good. And I wore that shirt so much. It was my favorite shirt, Rage Against the Machine. But I saw a lot of concerts at Sunken Gardens in San Antonio. I'll wrap it up with a few big concerts I went to. Once my brother bought tickets to Metallica at Retama Park. So me, my brother, and John Lewis went to see Metallica, and they played like a 3-hour set, and they didn't have any opening act. It was just Metallica. There wasn't any sponsors or anything like that. It was just Metallica, and there was a lot of crazy moshing and stuff going on there. But I remember I was like right in front of the stage, and during the song One, like when I was like singing the lyrics, and when it gets to the lyric one, I went like this. I was like blah 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 one. And then the lead singer, James Hetfield, was making direct eye contact with me. He's like, one, like at the same exact time. And it was like a moment, The next concert I'll mention is Tom Petty in Dallas. And I went there with a bunch of people that weren't really my friends. And you never want to go with a group of people that aren't your friends and that talk shit about you. So the actual concert, Tom Petty, was good, but getting there was rough, because it was just me, my brother, and we went with Benny and Benny's friends, but Benny's friends did not like me or my brother. And the night before, we were in a hotel and like sleeping on the floor, and I could not get any sleep. And I woke up, I opened my eyes in the morning, and my brother's like, you slept a lot. I saw you. Your eyes were closed. And I was like, no, I didn't sleep at all. And we got in a huge fight. And but when the concert actually happened, it was a great experience. It was an outdoor venue as well, but it was so huge, and you couldn't get close to the stage. They had seats in front of the stage. The opening act for Tom Petty was Blind Boys of Alabama, which I remember enjoyed too. But I remember Tom Petty, he played, songs that I grew up hearing. and hearing those songs live was just incredible. And like it was hard not to like break down into tears, like I was a Beatles fan. Like during Free Falling, at least I had to keep my composure during Free Falling, because like that's like one of the first songs I ever learned on the guitar, one of the only songs I learned on the guitar. But hearing that first chord, the G, the dun, then the D, dun, 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 it was just like, whoa. Like, but yeah, I'm getting choked up right now. No, but out of all the concerts I've ever been to, that one was the only those are some of the most memorable. And that Tom Petty Free Falling song, that was when I was just like, hearing it live. And if you're a young person listening to me, you really do want to go to concerts when you get a chance. It's a different time now, and people aren't as friendly anymore, and they're not in public in particular, and especially in real life and in one-on-one conversation, and everybody has phones, and so that changes the whole dynamic of things. So it is a whole different ball game now, but actually hearing the music live, you can't get better than that. Like actually feeling the vibrations of the music and leaving the concert like barely being able to hear. It's a great thing. Losing your hearing is awesome, kids. Come on. But no, but concerts like that, I'll always hold a piece of my heart. Like I said, I'll even remember the very first one, Humble Pie. And I'm not out here buying Humble Pie records. I've haven't listened to them in 10 or 20 years, but I really enjoyed that, hearing them live and hearing a live concert and a live guitar and a live drums. The very first time I ever heard a guitar was in 6th grade, when Waylon Diggs brought his guitar and amp to Bradley Middle School. And he sat out the front of Bradley Middle School, because I guess the kids would hang out there before school started for the first 10 or 15 minutes. And he played Stairway to Heaven. And I had never like really heard that song and never really thought about the guitar or anything. But hearing him play that live in front of me with an amp, the opening, the Stairway of Heaven, do 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 do. No, I was just like, wow, and got chills. Like, whoa, like that's incredible. Like, and I didn't hear live music again until working for the newspaper when I was 14. And I remember the first time I had sold a lot of newspaper subscriptions one day. And so our boss, John and Alice, dropped off all the sales kids. And he's like, you're going to go to the bar with me. We're going to have some drinks. I'm like, okay, just don't tell anyone. I'll say you're my son. And so we went to a bar, and there was a band, and they were playing they were playing a Bob Dylan cover, Knocking on Heaven's Door. And I was 14 and had a few drinks. And so I was like, I remember I was like getting into it. Looking back, I was probably acting like an idiot, like just enjoying the music, and they played that song, Knocking on Heaven's Door, and everybody clapped. And then I turned to John Ornelas and I was like, wow, that was a great Guns N' Roses cover. And then he gave me a look like I was the stupidest person in the world. He's like, Guns N' Roses, dude? That's fucking Bob Dylan. What are you talking about, Guns N' Roses? That's one of the most famous songs ever written by Bob Dylan. And then I'm like, oh, I'm not too familiar with. You don't know Dylan? What, are you living under a rock? Like he's telling me I'm like 14, 15 years old, but later Bob Dylan would become my favorite musician, John Ornelas, if you're watching down from us. But I'll remember that. And I remember that was one of the very first times I heard live music, live guitar, live drums. And that was at a little dive bar at Thousand Oaks in Henderson Pass, right where I got the 12 stitches after getting hit with my first concert. But also right next to the dive bar in a little shopping center was the Rio's Golden Cut, where my mom used to take me and my brother for haircuts, because our father didn't have custody, and our father had custody. Our mom didn't have custody, but our father, being the cheap sociopath he is, never got his haircuts. And so our hair would just grow. The teachers would complain to the school. And eventually our mom would, come from across town and take us there to get a haircut. There was also a Dairy Queen there. and she'd take us for blizzards at the Dairy Queen. I go into more detail about this particular shopping center in my first book, Gonzo Education, if you're interested about hearing more. All right, today's Sunday. It was a great little podcast here today. Like I said, this isn't a yesterday was all about aliens. You really want to check out yesterday's podcast. This isn't an alien podcast. This isn't a basketball podcast. The Denver Nuggets might win the NBA championship tonight in Game 5 of the 2023 NBA Finals. Hopefully Miami wins and pushes it to Game 6 and then to Game 7. I'm cheering for the Heat. But when the series started, I did say Denver in 5, and today's Game 5. So it looks like a betting with your head and not your heart. Once again, it's always the best way to go if you want to make money. It's funner to bet with your heart, but it's more profitable to bet with your head. And I'm a big Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero fan. So I'm going for the Heat, but bet with your head. I noticed Denver is only favored by 8.5 or 9 points tonight. The previous games, 1 and Game 2 at home, they were favored by 11 points. So Vegas is telling you that more people are betting on the Heat. So they're saying the Heat do have a better chance than they did in the first 2 games, and they won Game 2. So don't count the Heat out. Jimmy Butler said it. They have they don't give a fuck factor, and tonight's they should not give a fuck. They should go out and just start swinging. Go out swinging. They're gonna if they're gonna win tonight, they're gonna make 25 3-pointers. That's the only way they're gonna win. They're just gonna shoot lights out 3-pointers, and Denver's gonna get a little choked up with the championship right there on the horizon, and push to Game 6. I'll probably watch a little bit of the game, and yeah. If you haven't followed me on my other channel, lots going on with the cat feeding. Had a great cat feeding today. I got some great video, and I went and checked on my mama cat and her little kittens. They're doing great as well. So I really enjoy and love doing that. It's kind of like I have 2 jobs. I got the cat feeding operation, and then I have my podcasting operation, and I'm really good at both of them. So share this podcast. The Mr. G podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. You can listen at work, at home, when you're working out, when you're cleaning your house. Spotify podcast, Apple Podcasts is the best place. Also iHeartRadio podcasts, and Amazon podcasts. Everywhere you get podcasts. Full episodes of the Mr. G podcast are uploaded to Twitter and YouTube in their entirety as well. Thank you all for a great day today. And I hope everybody's happy. For me and my street kitties, I bid you farewell. I tell you, love you thy neighbor, and enjoy every moment of this miracle that we call life. We're all on this rock in the corner of the Milky Way, of the boondocks of the Milky Way, flinging around a sun going 1,000,000 miles per hour. Out there in the universe, there's galaxies colliding with each other. There's supernovas. There's stars a billion times bigger than our sun, and we're just a speck of dust. So let's enjoy being on this speck, this miracle that we're even existing on this speck. And don't try to make it harder for your neighbor. Don't try to make it harder for anybody. And if it's hard on you, just try to enjoy every moment, because many people would wish that they would have that moment to enjoy. I love you. Aloha.